Hello,
All right.
folks. Thank you for. Oh, you there,
Go ahead,
Colin?
Adam.
Hi, folks. This is State Representative Adam Niemer. We're coming to you. Thank you for joining us on our Tuesday evening edition of our town hall. Now, tonight, guys, we have a special treat, a great treat for you. I first met this excellent individual who's a school choice advocate. We were at Young Americans for Liberty conference a few years ago, and I tell you, folks, this guy. He knows what he's talking about, and we are very lucky to have him with us here today. That is Corey DeAngelis, and Corey is a senior fellow at the American Federation for Children. He's also an executive director at Education Freedom Institute, an adjunct scholar at the Cato Institute, a senior fellow at the Reason Foundation, and a board member at Liberty Justice Center. He was named Forbes 30 Under 30. Corey, you just had there's just more and more and more here. You're just constantly working. I think I saw on Facebook just a couple of weeks ago, you are now a fellow at Stanford Hoover Institute. Is that correct?
Yes, thanks. Thanks for pointing
Awesome.
that out.
Awesome. Corey, I'll just kick it over to you. Folks, you're in for a treat.
Yeah, cool. Look, it's great to be with you guys. I don't know how long you want me to open for, but I'll just talk until I lose you guys. But we've had a school choice revolution moving in red states in particular all across the country. In 2 years alone, we've had 9 states go universal on school choice, meaning all families, regardless of income, regardless of background, regardless of zip code, in those states can now take their children's state-funded education dollars. In Arizona, for example, it's about $7,000 per student to the education provider of their choosing. That could be the public school. If you like your public school, you can keep your public school. Unlike with your doctor, you can actually keep it this time. But if not, you can take that funding to be directed by a parent to a private school to pay for tuition and fees, or a charter school or homeschool option, including a co-op or a learning pod or micro school, homeschool curriculum, any approved education expenditure. And the reason for all of this is we really got to thank you guys in Illinois with the Chicago Teachers Union overplaying its hand over and over and over again. Most recently, they just can't stop stepping in it. The news just broke recently. Stacey Davis Gates, the new president of the Chicago Teachers Union, now sends her kid to a private school, but then fights against the Invest in Kids Act in Illinois, giving scholarships to low-income kids to go to private school. So it's this classic school choice for me, but not for thee hypocrisy. And she kind of blamed the disinvestment, the so-called disinvestment in the public schools as to why she had to send her kid to private school. But that's a total heaping pile of garbage excuse to be a hypocrite, because look, the Chicago public schools, according to the latest data that I've seen, spend over $29,000 per student each year. Stacy's kid goes to a private school that costs about half that amount, about $14,750 in tuition each year. So it's not a problem of money. It's because the unions fight against accountability every step of the way. It's not a resource problem. It's a resource allocation problem. The government school monopoly that is the Chicago public school system is a total dumpster fire that has no incentive to spend additional dollars wisely. Stacey, in her statement trying to defend herself, which, look, I don't blame these hypocrites in office or in positions of power for sending their kids to private school. Everybody should find the best opportunity for their own children, but you shouldn't turn around, close the door behind you, and tell less advantaged families they can't have that same kind of choice. We saw this with Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, and I had hope for him. I wrote in the Wall Street Journal about this last year, right before the midterm elections, when he was running for governor for his reelection. He answered a candidate survey indicating that he supported the Invest in Kids tax credit scholarship program for low-income families. He said, yes, he supported that program, but then he did nothing at all to try to save the program this year. Voters don't like liars, and they should hold him accountable for at least, at the bare minimum, gaslighting the public on his position when it comes to private school choice. A lot of people were pushing back at me saying, look, why did you give J.B. Pritzker credit in Illinois? Why did you give Democrat Josh Shapiro credit in Pennsylvania? These guys don't actually support school choice. They're just trying to, indicate to voters. They're reading the polls. They're reading the tea leaves. And they're just, their heart's not in it. And I kind of agreed with the conservatives pushing back against my Wall Street Journal articles. But my point was more so about not that they had a true change of heart, but that there's a shift in the political winds when it comes to supporting parental rights and education. At least we have some high-profile Democrats starting to understand that coming out against parental rights and education directly can be a form of political suicide, like we saw with Terry McAuliffe in Virginia, in a state that apparently went 10 points to Biden just the year before. Terry McAuliffe, the former governor of Virginia, lost to Glenn Youngkin, a Republican, on the issue of education with those voters by 6 points, which was the number 2 issue in that election. So what I think for Republicans in blue states or in red states, there's a blueprint, a path towards success, towards expanding your majorities through school choice and through education freedom. And we saw Glenn Youngkin kind of tap into that a little bit. But what Republicans have done for far too long by keeping quiet about education is they've given Democrats a pass. Because if you think about it, Terry McAuliffe in Virginia, he was in a catch-22 situation. No matter what would have happened, he would have lost ground. Whether he said he was for parental rights, well, then his union bosses, Randy Weingarten and the teachers unions, would have been upset with him. Well, he took the other direction and quadrupled down on his anti-parent rhetoric. Even had Randy Weingarten stumping for him the night before the election, a what I would call a campaign blunder, because right after the election, after he lost, a mother in Virginia went on CNN actually saying that was the nail in the coffin moment for her. The school closer was Terry McAuliffe's campaign closer. And the reason McAuliffe lost, in my opinion, and according to the Washington Post exit polling, showing education as the number 2 issue and Glenn Youngkin just absolutely destroying McAuliffe with those voters, is that Glenn Youngkin made Terry McAuliffe make that choice. He came out against parents, and parents are a new special interest group that are paying attention to what politicians are saying. This deeply socialist worldview that I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach, or that kids and the money meant for educating them belong to the government and their institutions, that is a totally unpopular position, even among Democrats. And so if you can, as a Republican, get a Democrat to say the quiet part out loud, well, they're going to lose ground one way or the other. And so Glenn Youngkin tapped into that. If more Republicans don't follow the Glenn Youngkin blueprint, to be frank, they deserve to lose their elections going forward. But it's good news. Places like Chicago have really fueled the fire in red states. You had the same hypocritical union who, they send their kids. Another study out of AEI in 2013, the number's probably higher now. I'm not sure if you guys know this, but 39% of Chicago public school teachers send their kids to private school. That was back in 2013. It's gotten a lot worse since then. The number's probably higher. If a chef didn't eat their own food, would you eat at that restaurant? No, probably not. They know their product sucks. And the thing is, the union bosses are fighting to trap disadvantaged kids in those failure factories we call public schools, which I like to call government schools. And the way out is through school choice, is to allow less advantaged families have the funding follow the student to a school they're choosing. You had the CTU, total hypocrites, when they were pushing to close schools as long as any other union, even more so. They were the prime example of the problems of the public school system all across the country. They have no incentive to do the right thing. They even did a strike in 2022. 2 weeks to slow the spread turned into 2 years to flatten a generation. These school closures hurt kids academically, mentally, socially, even physically. You had the Chicago Teachers Union delete a tweet where they said, and I'm not kidding, the push to reopen schools is rooted in sexism, racism, and misogyny. And well, guess what? When Stacey Davis Gates tried to explain why she sent her kid to private school, her letter that just went out, she said that there has been a racist push to close schools recently.
Thank you, Corey. Thank you so much.
Beyond parody, you guys just fought to keep the schools closed. Y'all had an interpretive dance video to try to keep the schools closed as long as possible. And your board member, I forget her name, whatever her name was, the board member from CTU a couple years ago, she was vacationing in Puerto Rico in person, which is fun. That's fun. Whatever you want to do, go do it. But then she turned around at the same time. She was on her Instagram account, poolside, saying that it was too dangerous to go back to work in person. Total
That's right.
freaking hypocrites.
You're absolutely correct. Thank you, Corey. And that's the thing that when it comes to short memories, and I'm glad you're bringing all this up so folks can remember what happened in the last few years, but kind of jumping off of that with the Illinois Education Association, the National Education Association, with the donations that are made, unfortunately, a little bit to our side of the aisle. We just recently called for those donations to stop. But Representative Blaine Wilhauer, he had a piece of legislation to make Invest in Kids permanent and to expand that program. Blaine, could you speak to that and talk to Corey a little bit about that?
Yeah. Hey, appreciate it, Adam. And thank you, everybody, for being here with us this evening. I've followed Corey for a long time. He's the best and most articulate voice out there fighting for kids and for parents and opportunity over the last few years. And I've had the pleasure of getting to meet him in person at a Yale conference a while back, too. So thank you, Corey, for being here. I'm not sure which is worse, the vacation in Puerto Rico part or the couple years earlier when the CTU sponsored the trip to Venezuela to learn about it.
It's fitting, though, those socialists going to socialist countries to learn how to be better socialists. I mean, and a lot of these people, they truly have a communist mindset where they believe that the school system is their ideological training grounds for future socialists. I mean, the left has used the school system and infiltrated it for far too long, and they see it as a way to control the minds of other people's children.
But Corey, we're told all the time that the critical theory has no place in public schools. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist in Chicago, Illinois, or anywhere in the country for that matter.
Yeah, I mean, you had the NEA. They put out a proposition to teach critical race theory at their annual meeting from pre-K to 12th grade and through college. So it is in the schools that, they first started with it's not happening. This always happens, right? Once you reveal that and they can't ignore it anymore and you reveal that it's actually happening, then they'll say, yeah, it's happening and it's actually a good thing now. But that's why they're failing on the basics. I think Chicago public school students, according to the latest state assessment, only 17% are proficient in math. I mean, it's a total failure factory system. And look, they know it. The teachers unions know it. That's why you have Stacey Davis Gates sending her own kids to private school. She put in her letter defending her decision to send them to private school, saying that the public schools are failing Black and brown communities. Okay, yeah, that's great that you had an exit option, an escape hatch, but why shouldn't other families have an escape hatch too? I mean, she's making the case for us, and it's great. But she should turn around and support the Invest in Kids Act.
Oh, I mean, they absolutely would, but what it comes down to is power. We all know that the power of the teachers union, the power of the money that they can put into politics. 20,000 kids are on a waiting list for this program. This has been an extremely successful program. I've actually got legislation that removes the sunset on it. It ups the caps from 75% tax deduction to 100. We need to go all in on this type of stuff, not end it. As our hypocrite governor, he did say that he supported it, but he didn't. You're right, he didn't do much to back that up in the General Assembly. But at the end of the day, this is a very successful program. It's giving kids opportunities. I've said, and I said on the floor of the House, among many other things, that this is probably the best violence prevention program that the city of Chicago or the state of Illinois has. We all say education is the key to opportunity. Well, the education system in the state of Illinois, not just the city of Chicago, the state in general, is an abysmal failure. 7 out of every 10 kids in this state don't read at grade level, and we're just setting kids up for failure.
That's right. I want to hit couple more things on the hypocrisy. The Wall Street Journal article on this, where the Democrats killed the program, basically, they pointed out the hypocrisy from Pritzker, but they also pointed out that the Senate president sent their kids to private school. The leader in the House, I guess that's the speaker in Illinois, sent their kids to private school too, which is great again, but they shouldn't turn around and give and block that opportunity for less advantaged kids. Yeah, I mean, the teachers unions do have a lot of funding, and in blue states, they usually give all that money to Democrats to keep Democrat majority. majorities, if they're giving any to Republicans, that is a total shame. They usually, for Republicans to accept that funding, they shouldn't do it. If they want to accept funding from the Marxist teachers unions, they should change the R next to their name and put a D or an S for
100%.
socialist.
100%. The Republicans in the state of Illinois, especially downstate Illinois, which is very red, has a rich tradition of being propped up by the teachers unions. The three of us guys here, our districts were never represented by someone who wasn't primarily funded by the teachers unions before we got into this thing. So they've got a stronghold down here, and we've been very vocal on this. Chris and I put out a letter with the support of the Freedom Caucus that basically Republicans should disinvest from the teachers union and do exactly what they say there, because at the end of the day, they're the ones that are standing in the way of any reform that's not only good for our students but good for our state. They stand in the way of important tax reforms and pension reform and everything giving students options. Republicans in this state need to make a decision whether they are going to support parents and students and citizens, or they're going to continue to carry water for the teachers unions. You can't do both. It's a contrast. You can't do both. They're standing in the way of every major reform in this state that's going to make the quality of life for kids and parents better.
And you're not going to gain seats by converting to being a Democrat and keeping an R next to your name. And that's not how it works. I mean, look, school choice and embracing education freedom can help the Republicans gain seats because it's a political winner. It's popular among voters, at least when it comes to Democrats, independents, and Republicans. Supermajority support of Americans from all political backgrounds for school choice. And then this is the only reform where Republicans can actually give a benefit away while also decreasing government size. Democrats give goodies away all the time and buy votes. This is the one kind of rare opportunity where Republicans can actually give funding to families and let them choose more opportunities for their kids' education while also decreasing government involvement in our lives and also saving taxpayer money if it's not the full amount of. Look, Chicago Public Schools spend $29,000 or so a kid. You can give them half of that amount, save taxpayer money. You're still being conservative. You're still reducing government size, but you're creating new single issue voters on the issue of school choice. So look at what happened in Florida with DeSantis in 2018. You wouldn't know it because in 2022, he won his reelection by 20 points and had huge support even in places like Miami, which is a school choice haven. They have some of the most school choice in the country. But in 2018, he barely won his initial election to Andrew Gillum, a Democrat who opposed their existing private school choice program, that was already serving at the time over 100,000 students, disproportionately from low-income families. It was an average household income of $30,000 to $40,000 for each student using the program, and they were disproportionately non-white students as well. Well, when Gillum came out, the Democrat opponent, saying he was going to get rid of, or at least he opposed that program, those voters came out in full force in support of DeSantis because they turned that issue of a better education and better future for their children into a single issue vote. And the CNN exit polling, or it was Washington Post, one of the lefty news sources, exit polling in Florida at the time. One second. The exit polling at the time, either from CNN or Washington Post in 2018 in Florida, found that Black mothers were disproportionately, or at least more than expected, supported DeSantis than we would have thought. And so the headline in the Wall Street Journal at the time was "School Choice Moms Tipped the Governor's Race in Florida." So this is a path towards success. And since then, DeSantis won by 20 points. Florida's expanded their to super majorities in both chambers. This also happened in West Virginia, which was already a red state, but they have expanded to super majorities since they've expanded school choice at the same time. So this is the right thing to do, but it can also be a political winner for Republicans.
Who would have ever thought the making moves to increase the quality of life for your citizens would translate into political success? It takes a little bit of boldness, though, and that's what we need here in the state of Illinois.
That's true. That's true, Blaine, and that's very true. And you're absolutely right about the stranglehold the NEA has, the IEA has, special interest groups here in the state of Illinois, and how it scares legislators who would support the Invest in Kids Act away from actually doing it. And also the monopolization of the IEA here in the state of Illinois and what that leads to, and not supporting the Invest in Kids, are pushing bad pieces of legislation and holding us all back. But our chairman, Chris Miller, I think would like to talk a little bit about that. I'll hand it over to Chris.
Well, I think it's important to be lucid when we approach this issue, and you have to watch not what politicians say, but what politicians do, and you can make some pretty accurate assessments. I mean, especially if you go to the IAA and the NAA website and look at their convention notes and their resolutions, and you can see that they have become radicalized, and all they are is a fundraising arm for the radical left. And lest we forget, these are the people that were responsible for shutting down our schools, for masking our kids, for promoting a woke curriculum, and most recently to work in destroying the Invest in Kids Act. I mean, this is a travesty that this has happened on our watch, and I know that that's one reason why we're boldly pushing back against this nonsense. Like Representative Wellhauer made the point that there's 20,000 kids, underprivileged kids typically, waiting in the wings to sign up for this program, and it's absolutely unconscionable to me. It's morally and ethically wrong not to give these kids an opportunity to get out of failing schools. Competition fixes almost everything that we deal with. There needs to be competition for education dollars. And guess what? What we witnessed during COVID, if there was actually fair competition for the dollars that are out there for education, most of this nonsense that we witnessed firsthand would have never happened. I mean, think about the bill that you had, Blaine, just to have the money follow the kids to go to in-person learning, and the pushback. That was killed by Republicans, I think, if I remember right. And
it failed in committee. We actually got a committee vote on it, and the Democrats voted it down. All it said that is, if your school is not giving your kids an option for in-person learning, they can take those education dollars to a public or private school that is. And the Democrats had the audacity to vote that down during the height of COVID. It was absolutely ridiculous.
And we have lawmakers on our side of the aisle that didn't want to sign on to support the Invest in Kids. We had a letter for Invest in Kids, and we had Republicans on our side of the aisle would not sign that letter.
That is insane. I mean, school choice is extremely popular among Republican primary voters in particular. And I mean, it's popular across the board, but you guys need to lock arms on the issue of school choice. Again, Glenn Youngkin showed the way when it comes to political success for Republicans in a blue state. Just talking about the issue of parental rights in education. I mean, you have other states, California, a lot of stuff from California bleeds over to Illinois, so watch out. I'm on the board of Liberty Justice Center, and we just intervened in a case with Chino Valley Unified School District where they have a simple policy. This is kind of a district that's controlled by Republicans or conservatives in a blue state, where if your kid transitions at school, well, the government school employees need to tell the parents about this kind of gender transitioning happening with their kids. And it seems like a pretty simple policy of transparency and keeping parents in the loop with what's happening with their own children's sexual identity. And you have the nerve of the authoritarian statists in California. The Attorney General, Rob Bonta, filed a lawsuit to wreak havoc and rain down and subvert the local decision-making of the district, and to subvert the will of parents, and to infringe on the most fundamental parental rights in education, trying to file this lawsuit to keep sexual secrets about children from their own parents. It's just absolutely ridiculous that we're at a point in America where we're actually fighting about this, where you have the authoritarians in office really trying to keep secrets from parents at the school level. So Illinois needs to watch out too. It's another good reason for school choice. I mean, academics is a huge part of it, right? A lot of the school systems are just failing on basic metrics with math and reading, but it's even worse than that. There's a lot of families who woke up over the Zoom school with the woke ideology happening in the classroom. A lot of parents just want the kids to learn the basics at school. And if there's sensitive topics, they want to talk about that stuff at home. And we saw over the Zoom learning that wasn't, the basics weren't the only thing going on in the classroom. And Vodi Bakum said it best. We cannot continue to send our children to Caesar for their education and be surprised when they come home as Romans. Well, the good news is, at least in red states, the parents aren't surprised anymore. I think it's true in blue states too, but it's about time that those parents show up to the ballot box in red and blue states in order to protect their parental rights in education, make this a number one voting issue, and fight back against the authoritarians trying to strip their parental rights away. And this is just another example of that with the Invest in Kids Act, the Democrats waging war on parental rights in education, especially when you have thousands and thousands and thousands of families on wait lists desperate for a better education for their kid. And part of it's academics, but part of it's also raising your kid with values that align with your own. No one wants to send their kid to an indoctrination facility for 13 years where the kids are being brainwashed to hate their own parents. I mean, that's just fundamentally and morally wrong. I mean, in red states, they've taken another approach to try to control the curriculum from the top down and ban CRT or to, tweak things in the system. And I think that could be a step in the right direction. But we've also seen in these same red states undercover video of the public school employees saying, hey, we're going to do it anyway. We're going to break the law. We're going to call it something else. We're going to say social emotional learning or mental health services as opposed to CRT. So those aren't as effective as we would like them to be. The better ways from the bottom up, you'd think Democrats would be able to get on board with this, where if you want to send your kid to a school that teaches CRT, fine, but don't force my family and my kid to go to an institution that isn't just teaching the basics. Like, just let people choose for their own kids and stop trying to control the minds of other people's children.
It's absolutely right. Thank you, Corey. And you have time for one more question. I have one more question for you. So one of the biggest myths that we see coming from the IEA, from the teachers unions, is that school choice is going to hurt teachers, that the teachers will not be able to teach, the teachers will be penniless, they'll be left destitute, and that the Republicans that are pushing school choice want nothing more than to drive good teachers away from the industry. Could you please address that?
That's the dumbest argument I've ever heard. Look, there's teachers in private and charter schools too, and parents are the first teachers for their own children. They're educators too. But at the end of the day, the government school dumpster fire monopoly system does little to nothing to actually benefit the teachers. It mostly benefits the people at the top, the superintendents and the teachers union bosses like Stacey Davis Gates, that makes at least $150,000 a year, and Randy Weingarten, who makes over $500,000 a year. Look at the trends over time. We don't have a shortage of money in the system. We dump more money into the system. It's just not spent wisely. In the U.S., since 1970, per student education expenditures have increased by at least 157% after adjusting for inflation. Teacher salaries, though, have only increased by about 8% in real terms. So the money's not making its way into the classroom. It goes towards administrative bloat and staffing surges because the monopoly has no incentive to allocate those additional dollars wisely. You introduce competition, well, then the public school system has more incentive to actually put their money more where their mouth is, give the money to the teachers, and raise salaries to the teachers who are doing a good job. You look at 5 studies that exist on the topic. I wrote about this at the Washington Examiner in a blog called School Choice Benefits Teachers Too. All 5 studies that are on the topic, it's not a lot, but it's all the studies on the topic, find that there's statistically significant positive effects of private and charter school competition on the teacher salaries in the public schools too. So competition in the market for goods and services is good for customers and families. Obviously, they're getting more choices, but competition in the labor market is good for employees because it gives their employer, the district, an incentive to spend additional dollars wisely. If you're doing a good job as a teacher, you're going to be making a lot more than you were in a system that has no competition at all. And, for all the trash that's written in the Washington Post, they had a good article over the pandemic period in New Jersey. A public school teacher, they outlined, left the system, started something called a micro school or pandemic pod, where 5 to 10 children got together in a household, They were making more money than they were in the public school system after being in it for decades in New Jersey. They had a fraction of the class size, 5 to 10 children as opposed to 30 or 40. And they had a lot more autonomy, less red tape to deal with the government school system. So school choice opens up the market for opportunities, not just for kids, but for teachers and employees as well. And look, you ask any teacher, they're not really happy with what's going on in the public school system either. They want to have more autonomy. They want higher pay. They want less red tape. They want smaller class sizes. What's a better way to do that than to expand school choice opportunities for kids, which gives more money that can go directly to the teachers and more opportunities for everybody.
Awesome. Corey, thank you so much. Thanks, Blaine and Chris and Colin, for being on here with us today. Corey, again, thank you for taking time out of your day to discuss this very important issue with us. And where can we find you on social media? Where can the folks reach out to you?
You can follow me on Twitter. It's at DeAngelis Corey. You'll see fun things like what I just posted about Randy Weingarten in a private conversation with a mother saying that the reason she closes all of her replies, like she closed the schools, is because I ratio her on Twitter all the time. She name dropped me. You can also see some fun interactions where I call out representatives for who are hypocrites, usually Democrats, for sending their own kids to private school. And I was on this Stacey Davis Gates story a week before the initial article started dropping, pointing out that there was some private CTU Facebook groups where the admins were admitting that they knew for weeks that Stacey sent her own kid to private school. So for more breaking news, follow me on Twitter, or X now, at DeAngelis Corey.
Thank you, Corey. Thanks, guys. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.